Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about share buybacks and specifically how I'm evaluating them. And you might be like, wait a minute, what is there actually to evaluate? And that's probably fair, but we're going to dig into it. Because if you remember, I updated my personal strategy to also include share buybacks. Basically saying I want companies that are rewarding shareholders either with dividend growth that outpaces inflation or share buybacks that increase my ownership stake in the company. So in this video, we're going to talk about share buyback yield and what it is, how I'm calculating it, and what I look for in terms of evaluating a company's share buybacks overall. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, when we look at a stock and we see its dividend yield, it's pretty clear what that is and what it tells us. It's the percentage of the share price that investors are getting back in the form of a cash dividend. And sometimes people build their whole portfolio strategy around that. But then with buybacks, it's just a little bit more complicated because they tend to fluctuate a little more than dividends do. And it's hard to know exactly how much benefit we're getting as shareholders. So what I've been doing is calculating the share buyback yield just to give myself a little bit more visibility into the benefit. And what exactly is a share buyback yield, you might say? Well, it's the percentage ratio of a company's stock repurchases compared to their market cap, but at the beginning of the period. So to calculate it, you would basically take the total value of the share buybacks that they executed, subtract the value of any shares that they issued, and then divide that by the market cap. But remember, you can't just take the current market cap. You have to take the market cap of the company at the beginning of the period when they started. So let's walk through a couple examples. And now first off, Lululemon, which we're going to be talking about again later this week. They don't actually pay a dividend, but they are buying back shares. So if we look at how much they've bought back over the trailing 12 months, it's $796 million. But they also issued $34 million in stock during that time. So net, they bought back $762 million worth of shares. Now the question though is, how do I find what the market cap was 12 months ago? Now this is where Seeking Alpha makes it pretty easy. We can just go to the charting tab, add market cap, remove price return, and then make sure that 1 year is selected for our time frame. And we see that a year ago, Lulu's market cap was around $48 billion. So if we take 762 million divided by 48.04 billion, we get 1.59%. So Lulu has a 1.59% buyback yield over the last 12 months. And now if we just want to compare that to their calendar year 2023, it would be 591.2 million minus the 42.4 million of shares that they issued, which would be $548.8 million of net shares repurchased. And if we look at what the market cap was at the beginning of 2023, it was $40.85 billion. Giving us a buyback yield of 1.12%. So at a very high level, the buyback yield has been growing, which is nice. All right, so let's look at a couple other stocks, and we'll start off with Caterpillar. Now, Caterpillar bought back over $9 billion worth of shares over the past 12 months. So if we calculate net repurchases, we take the 90/30 minus the 12 that they issued, and then we get 90/18. And then if we look at 1 year ago, the market cap was at $134.21 billion, which gives us a buyback yield of 6.72%. And when you add the fact that investors are also getting 1.61% in dividend yield from CAT, together that's a pretty impressive 8.33% or so in total reward back to shareholders. And I know it's a little bit more complicated than that because a share buyback isn't the same as cash back and share prices fluctuate all the time. But it's a very simple way to get an idea of how a company is rewarding shareholders over time. And so real quick, let's do one more and we'll try Visa. Now, Visa bought back a whopping $14.8 billion over the past 12 months. So if we take 14,810 minus out the 338 that they issued, we get 14,472. And then if we look at 1 year ago, the market cap was $445.68 billion, which gives us a buyback yield of 3.25%. And when you add the fact that investors are also getting 0.8% in dividend yield from Visa, together that's a little over 4% or so in total reward back to shareholders. And of course, this doesn't include any price appreciation that we would expect with the stock as the business grows. Okay, so we get how to calculate it, but the real question is, how would we actually use this information? And to me, the first benefit is that it makes share buybacks just a little bit more tangible so that we get some visibility into how a company is rewarding shareholders outside of just saying, well, do they pay a dividend or not? And then in general, how I would look at it would be like this. One, is the company buying back shares at all? And if they are, then obviously that's nice. But just to be clear, if a company's not buying back shares, it doesn't mean that they don't care about shareholders. I mean, you have other companies that are deploying capital in different ways, like many times reinvesting back into the business. And Amazon is the poster child for this. They don't pay a dividend and they don't buy back shares, but they invest a ridiculous amount of money into R&D, which for them includes technology and content spend, which also includes AWS. So while technically they're not rewarding shareholders with buybacks or dividends, they're rewarding them by continuing to grow and reinvent the business so that the share price goes up over time. Now, the issue is that not every company is as good at that as Amazon has been historically. And so you get to a point to where shareholders may have just preferred a buyback or a dividend. But regardless, I'll start off with seeing if they're buying back shares or not. And then I try to see if they're consistent with it. Is it something that they're steadily doing over time, or is it just here and there whenever they have some extra cash? Now, obviously, the more consistent, the better in terms of being able to predict the future value of it. And then, are they growing their buyback yield over time? Meaning, are they consistently buying back more and more shares? And of course, this can have some fluctuations based on share price. Just like how the dividend yield goes down and share price goes up, the same is going to be true for buyback yield. But still, we can evaluate if the amount the company is spending on buybacks is increasing over time, just like we do with dividends. And lastly, and probably best of all, is the company buying back shares at attractive prices? Now, in some cases, companies are constantly buying back shares every quarter and not really thinking about price. And while that may be okay, depending on if the share price is high at the time, it may not be the most efficient use of capital. But when you have a company that's being strategic and buying back more shares when their share price is low, then it's a sign of smart management trying to deploy capital in intelligent ways. But overall, we don't need to go to this level of depth in order to analyze share buybacks, but it can help us understand a little bit better the value that shareholders are getting for companies that don't pay a dividend or ones that do, but also buy back a large amount of shares. Caterpillar being a great example of that. But now, buyback yield isn't the only way to see this general idea in action. And actually, one of the easiest ways is just to visually look at the total shares outstanding. I do this on Seeking Alpha all the time, and it's extremely easy to just hover over the shares outstanding graph and see very quickly what the trend is and that it's going down over time. And now it's not very precise, but you can clearly see that they're reducing the share count over time and not diluting shareholders. You just can't really tell at what rate. But if you want to be more precise with it, you can simply calculate the percent reduction in shares over the past year. In Seeking Alpha, I prefer to do this on the quarterly data, so I'll just take the latest quarter and then compare it to the year before. So in this case for Lululemon, they had 126.3 million shares outstanding after the most recent quarter, and a year before that, they had 127.6 million shares, which means that they reduced by 1.3 million shares, or about 1.02% of their total share count. Or if you prefer, you could simply look at their most recent 10Q as well if you wanted to see it there. So again, there's way more things to evaluate about a stock than just the buyback yield or the share reduction percentage, because that'd be like just picking stocks based on dividend yield alone. It makes no sense. But it is a nice way to make share buybacks a little bit more tangible as we're evaluating companies. And for those companies that are strategically using buybacks instead of dividends, it helps us see the benefits that we're getting as shareholders a little bit clearer outside of just price appreciation. Because ultimately, we're getting a larger ownership stake in the business as shares are repurchased and retired. So what do you guys think about share buyback yield or even reduction of shares percentage? Are these things that you're already using in your analysis? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you want to see how I started integrating cash flow growth into my method to value stocks, click on this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.